This is Edward October, host of OctoberPod on YouTube. Hear that jingle jingle? It could be Kris Kringle, or a home invader looking for an open window, a jilted lover looking for revenge, or a disgruntled coworker hoping to spike your eggnog with arsenic. The girls of our true crime podcast are always on Santa's nice list, but the crimes they discuss are very naughty indeed. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, Jen.
Hey, Cam, how are you?
Happy day 8?
8. It's 8, day 8.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
8. Yep, we're done. We're on 8. Is it 8 Lords of Leaping today?
I don't know what that no,
or
that's 9
ladies
Lords
dancing?
of Leaping.
I don't know. I only know the 5 golden rings, to be honest, and the first one about the partridge in the pear tree.
And a beer.
Which
that's
is actually,
my favorite.
Yeah. But anyway, I got one for you today.
Little Bird told me that this is a doozy.
I was going to do this 2 or 3 years ago, but it was just, it's a lot. It's a lot to do. Normally, I try to do things that aren't really biased, but this one, I can't help it. But we'll talk about this afterwards. So yeah, see what you think. All right?
I'm going to see. I'm ready.
On a hot August 9th in 2009, in Brunswick, Georgia, 22-year-old Guy Heinze Jr. had worked all day at his construction job and had just gotten paid. He had a really big night lined up, and it went something like this. Between 7 and 9 p.m., Guy took a shower, shaved his head, and hung out with his family. Those are the 9 people with whom he shared a 908-square-foot trailer. Tiny trailer. The tiny trailer in the New Hope Mobile Home Park had no air conditioning, and Guy wanted to spend the Friday evening away from the claustrophobic confines. So between 9 and 10 p.m., he rode to Darien, Georgia with Russell Toler Jr., one of his housemates and cousin. Between 10 and 10:30 p.m., they stopped at the store. Guy was back at the trailer between 10:30 and 11:30 that night and asked Russell Jr. if he could borrow his car for the rest of the evening. Having secured the vehicle, Guy Jr. went to a drug dealer off 4th Street and bought crack cocaine. He then sat in Barrington Park and smoked his crack until 1 a.m., and then left to get more crack at about 1:30 a.m. Then Guy drove back to Barrington Park and consumed those drugs as well until about 4 a.m. in the morning. Then he drove to the Best Western Hotel on St. Simon's Island to hang out with his little brother Tyler, and that is about a 45 to 55-minute drive. He knocked on the hotel door at 5:30 a.m., but no one answered. So he walked to a payphone where he called his brother, and this was all seen on CCTV at 5:36 a.m., making that call, right? Mm-hmm. So he's on tape making this phone call. And then just before 6 a.m., he was let into the hotel room. Then, after he and Tyler dropped off Tyler's girlfriend at her house, they went to Huddle House for breakfast, which Guy paid for at 7:10 a.m. There's a receipt. Mm-hmm. Then Guy headed back to the trailer park, where he arrived around 8 o'clock in the morning. And somewhere between shaving his head, shopping, smoking crack, driving to St. Simon to see his brother, eating breakfast, and driving home, the police say Guy Heinze Jr. bludgeoned to death the 8 people who lived with him in that tiny trailer.
All those people in one trailer, too?
Mm-hmm. They were due to be evicted because there are so many people living in there. Guy Heinze Jr. spent an uneventful childhood fishing and camping with his family. In fact, his whole family loved to go fishing and camping. He spent a lot of time with his grandmother while his parents worked. He was a likable, good kid with average grades, and he made friends easily. At the age of 12, he started smoking weed, and things didn't change much until he was about 15, and then he began to dabble with harder drugs, and he began to skip school. Guy's mother died of a drug overdose when he was just 17, and Guy leaned heavier on his father and his brother and drugs to cope. By this time, Guy had given up on high school, but was determined to be a hard worker with a great work ethic. And his employers and coworkers all said that he was a wonderful employee and wasn't the type to be aggressive or hot-headed. Guy moved into the trailer of New Hope with his father, Guy Heinze Sr., earlier that summer. Guy Jr. had lived in his own apartment previously, and the move into the trailer was only temporary because Guy Sr., Guy Jr., and Tyler, who I believe was 16 at the time, were supposed to move into a different trailer later that weekend. And even though living with that many people in a small space had its challenges, Guy, his brother Tyler, and his grandmother all say that there were no ongoing disputes or grudges between the residents. The family was a super close-knit group. Guy Williams Heinze Sr. was 45 years old and, by all accounts, was said to be a nice man who would do anything to help. He kept his nose clean pretty much, and although there was trouble in the 80s with the law, that was just about it, right? Mm-hmm. That's a little bit of trouble. Guy Sr. had also recently won a civil suit against McIntosh County, which granted him about $25,000. The suit was over some mobile home that Guy Sr. had owned, but he hadn't gotten the money yet due to the ruling being put under appeal. So aside from Guy Heinze Sr. and Jr., the people who lived in the trailer were mostly members of the Toler family. And so we're going to go through everybody that lived in the trailer. So Guy Heinze Sr., which was Guy's dad, and Russell Toler Sr. were half-brothers. And the family had grown up together. They vacationed together, and they loved each other as a family. Some accounts do say that the Heinze and Toler families were not really related at all. Others say that they were half-brothers. Russell Toler Sr., who is known by most people as Rusty, was 44, and he's described as a humble, loyal, and hardworking man. Rusty adored his children and would help them in any way they could. Russell Toler Jr. was 20, and he was very quiet, and he loved to go fishing and just being outdoors. And like I said earlier, the whole family loved to fish. There was Michael Toler, age 19, and he's described as, quote, the nicest human being ever. Mm-hmm. Michael had Down syndrome and had worked hard to overcome a speech impediment. And he had gone through many hours of training to get a job at Goodwill. Michelle Toler was age 15, and she was just this girl with a big heart, and she had so many friends. And Chrissy Toler, she was 22, and she lived a bit of a troubled life. She shared a little boy with a man by the name of Byron Jemerson, whom Chrissy testified against in 2006.
Oh.
Byron was in an armed robbery case, and she testified against him. Oh. And Jemerson was given a 30-year sentence as a result. Now, Chrissy had had several run-ins with the law in her short life and was living in the trailer with her new boyfriend, Joseph West, who's age 30. Now, in September of 2000, Joseph West had pled guilty to possession of cocaine and was sentenced to 5 years probation. His probation was revoked after he tested positive for cocaine in October of 2002. Joseph West's family described him as having a big heart and said that he loved spending time with Christy and her 3-year-old son, who also lived in the trailer. So the last resident of the cramped mobile home was Brenda Gail Falagan. She was 49. Brenda was his half-sister, and she unfortunately had suffered a debilitating stroke, and she really couldn't take care of herself. And at times she had to use a wheelchair. Brenda, who had no one to care for her since her husband had passed away, Russell took her in. And Brenda had kind of a sad life. She and her husband had married, and they each had a son, and both those sons had died in a house fire. Oh. Her son was 7 and his son was 20. And this was decades before. It's horrible.
It's awful.
So when Guy Heinze Jr. arrived home just before 8 a.m. after dropping Tyler off, it was about a 30-minute drive to the trailer at New Hope, he entered the trailer only to find the bloody corpses of 7 people. Oh. His father, Guy Sr., Rusty Toler Sr., Russell Jr., Michelle, Chrissy Toler, Brenda Falagan, and Joseph West. Michael Toler and the 3-year-old were just clinging to life. Guy's father's body was the first thing that he saw when he entered the trailer, and Guy Sr. was so severely beaten that Guy Jr. barely recognized him. And as Guy made his way through the trailer, he saw more blood. And each doorway he approached revealed more blood and more mangled bodies. This kid, young guy, he's trying to process what's happening, and he's desperately looking for the phone. I mean, he rarely carried one. But the trailer was cluttered and a total mess, not only from the struggle, but they kind of, from what I've gathered, the trailer was usually very messy. But there was a struggle in the house, too. And Guy Jr. didn't have his own cell phone. In his panic, he wasn't really sure what to do. So he finally found his cousin Michelle's phone and tried to call the police, but either the battery was dead or in his panic, he couldn't dial correctly.
Makes sense.
Somehow he didn't get through to the police. Once again, he went through the house. He was trying to find another cell phone or a landline to call for help. And in confusion, he found himself in the room with Rusty Toler Sr. and Michael. And Rusty was on the floor and Michael was on the bed. And there was blood all over the walls and all over the floor. And he did see a shotgun next to Rusty's body, and he picked it up, and he was thinking, he pretty much thought that the gun was stolen, right? So he's going to take it. He thought that, and he also thought maybe somebody could be still in the trailer coming back. You know what I mean? He didn't want the police to find this. He panicked. He saw the gun, and for some reason, he's just like, didn't want the police to find the gun. So he goes back outside. He takes the gun. He goes back outside, and he goes to the front door, and he starts yelling for help. And I'm going to curse here in a little bit, so bear with me. But he went outside the trailer, and he was screaming, quote, "My whole family's dead, and they've been beaten to death. Call the law." I mean, he goes on and on. It's like, my uncle, there's a 911 call out there, and it's pretty distressing when you hear it. He goes to the car, and he puts the gun in the trunk, the gun that he took from the house in the trunk, and then he puts Michelle's phone in the back seat of the car. And then at 8:05 a.m., a neighbor by the name of Margaret Orlinsky, she calls 911. And you can hear the guy on the phone call in 911, and he's screaming, "My whole family's dead. They're all dead." He runs back into the trailer, and he discovers that Michael's is still breathing. And he runs back out, and he yells to the neighbor, "Tell him to hurry. Michael's still alive." And for the next few minutes, two neighbors, one named Mike and the other one, Margaret Orlinsky, relayed to the 911 operators just how hysterical and distraught Guy was and how he kept screaming at the police to hurry because his cousin Michael was still alive. Guy told them that Michael's face was smashed in, but he could still see Michael's chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. At one point, Guy went in and sat on the bed trying to comfort Michael. Then Guy became very agitated when the 911 operator kept asking him questions, like they handed the phone over to Guy to speak to the 911 operator. And when the operator asked him what the house looked like on his arrival, Guy responded, quote, "It looks like a fucking murder scene."
I guess they wanted the description of what the outside of the house looked like, so they knew
inside. They wanted to know more information. I mean, all they know is what he's screaming is, "Come, the house, they've killed my entire family." So they just wanted to know what exactly is going on. And I mean, at one point, when the police finally do come in the trailer and they're asking, and they're like, "Okay, in the front room, there's one body. No, wait, there's two. But no, there's four. We're going to have to call you back."
Oh.
Yeah. There's pictures online that you can see. And
no thanks.
It's bad.
Nope, I'm good. Thank you, though.
It's a bloodbath. There's blood everywhere. When police arrive at the trailer, Guy was beside himself with grief, and he was in shock. Like, he even retched and heaved next to a truck, and the color had drained from his face, and he broke out into a sweat. And all he could think of is what he just needed to call his brother Tyler, and he had to tell Tyler that their father was dead. Now, the police took Guy Heinze Jr. to the station and questioned him for 14 hours.
Straight?
They didn't give him a chance to detox from the drugs in his system, nor did they give him time to process what had happened. And not only was he questioned while under the influence, but he had also been awake for over 24 hours. And by the end of the interview, he had been awake for almost 40 hours. And then later, somebody asked the officer why they questioned Guy while he was still under the influence. And the officer said, "Well, I really didn't think Guy was a likely suspect at the time."
Really?
I
was just going to say, I would still think that you want that interrogation to go. You know what I mean? Right. You don't want any loopholes. So I would have thought that they would have, even if they didn't think he was a suspect, let him dry out.
Right. Something. Later, Guy Jr. would take and pass a polygraph test. Well, that's what his lawyers say. And polygraphs, as we know, are notoriously unreliable and cannot be used in court to prove one's guilt or innocence. However, in Georgia, it can be used when it comes to the sentencing part of a trial, should a defendant be found guilty. Unfortunately, Mr. Blackstone, the man who administered the polygraph test, said Guy had passed, and he had also claimed that he'd sent the results out to have them verified by another expert. Blackstone claimed that the expert said Heinze had passed the polygraph test. However, it was discovered at trial that the expert that Blackstone had sent the tests to, that expert was out of town, and he had never even seen the results at all. Or Blackstone said that he had seen the results.
So he lied?
So he lied. He perjured himself. So Blackstone was subsequently brought up on perjury charges and fined.
Why would he lie? What would be in it for him?
I don't know. I think he was charged like $1,000. I don't know why. But he did say that Guy passed the polygraph test, as the lawyer said. I mean, he took a bunch of polygraph tests. So did he really pass the polygraph test or not? We don't know. That's all up in the air right now.
I just don't see the point in lying about it.
Me either. In the meantime, Michael Toler and the 3-year-old were taken to a nearby hospital where they clung to life. During questioning, Guy admitted to buying drugs and using drugs twice that night. And one round of drugs he paid for, and the other one was, quote, on loan because the dealer knew that he was good for it. Guy told him that the gun he found in the house was in the back of his car, and as was Michelle's cell phone. And he also said that, when police first asked him about the guns, is there any guns in the house? He immediately said, yeah, there's 2 that I know of. One I took and put out in the car because it's hot. He said it was hot. Well, later we learned that it's not hot, but he took it out because he thought that it was stolen.
So he was trying to protect somebody in his family, not himself. But yeah.
Right. I mean, when you live that kind of lifestyle, that you just kind of, somebody in the house might have, who knows? He was protecting whoever. But he did admit to it right up front. He admitted that the gun was in the back of the car, and Michelle's cell phone was also in the back of the car. And Michelle's cell phone had a spot of Joe West's blood on it. Guy also admitted to having a bag of Darvocet pain pills and marijuana in the car. And at the end of the 14-hour questioning, the police arrested Guy on drug possession charges, tampering with the crime scene, and obstruction. Are you following so far?
Why is it obstruction? Because he hid the gun?
I guess.
Was that gun the murder weapon?
We'll get into that, but the gun that he took, no.
Okay, so then how is that obstruction?
I don't know. I don't know the charges. Actually, even looking, I can't find the original court documents for this case.
Are they
But I
missing?
can find the appeal. No, I can find the appeal. I'm sure we'd have to pay a couple $1,000s to get the court documents.
I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So the police had thought at first that everybody in the house had been shot because it was one of the bloodiest crime scenes that they'd ever witnessed. And even the director of the Glynn County Coroner's Office said it was the worst crime scene that he'd even seen in his 17 years of his job. While the 3-year-old would go on to survive the attack, Michael Toler eventually succumbed to his injuries just 2 days later. While in jail on drug and obstruction charges, Guy Heinze Jr. missed the funerals of his family because the police could not find a working ankle monitor for him. Guy was released.
A lawsuit?
I don't know.
You would think an attorney would not let that fly.
You'd think a lot of this wouldn't fly. It's something.
Okay, keep going.
Guy was released on bail on September 4th and then promptly arrested for murder just a few hours later that same day. The police believe that Guy Heinze Jr., all 5'8" of him and 180 pounds, had killed, actually beaten to death, all 8 adults, 4 of whom were healthy grown men, all by himself.
At the same time.
At one night, right, in just a few hours. And Guy Heinze Jr. would spend the next 4 years in jail awaiting trial. Nothing like that quick and...
speedy trial, that's what I was thinking.
The prosecution put forth the theory that Guy Jr. had returned to the trailer high on crack and wanted his cousin Michael's pain pills. And when Michael's father, Rusty Sr., told Guy that he couldn't have them, Guy became so enraged that he killed Rusty and then had to kill everybody else so that there wouldn't be any witnesses. The police claimed that then he took all the money from the victims, but it just wanted to note here that Rusty Sr. still had $61 on him when they found his body.
So he wasn't robbed. Okay, interesting.
Unless he had the $61 that they couldn't find. I don't know. The prosecution also stated that to kill that many people and inflict 220 different injuries on those 8 people, it would have taken Guy about 2 to 3 hours to complete the crime.
Plus, he's high. Don't forget.
He's on crack, right. Chrissy Toler, her son, and her boyfriend, Joe West, were seen on CCTV footage in the store near Brunswick, Georgia, as late as 11:45 p.m. Then at 2:16 a.m., Michelle Toler made a call from the house phone to a friend and left a voicemail. The voicemail Michelle left was just the average and like, hey, what's up? That kind of phone call. There's no sign that anything was wrong. She didn't ask for help. She didn't sound like she was under duress. So it was safe to say that the murders had not yet started when she made that call at 2:16 a.m. Then at 3:45 a.m., Michelle made a 36-second call from her cell phone. And then at 3:46, there was a misdial from Michelle's phone number to a number that was no longer in service. If the family were attacked immediately after Michelle made the last phone call, Guy Heinze Jr. would have had to kill all 8 people between 3:45 and 4:30 and then find a place to clean up. Presumably, he would have needed to shower and change and find a place to dispose of a murder weapon because he needed to make that 45-minute drive to the Best Western and arrive at 5:30 a.m. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It was the police's theory that it would take 2 to 3 hours for him to inflict 220 wounds, and yet if Michelle was alive at 3:45 a.m., that only gave Guy Jr. about 45 minutes to kill everybody. So there's no doubt in question as to when Guy arrived at the hotel because he was seen on the CCTV footage at 5:36 a.m.
And how many grown adults were in that trailer?
There were 4 grown men. 2 women. There was Michael, who was 19, but he had Down syndrome. I mean, he could fight, technically. And then there was a baby, a 3-year-old.
Wow.
So, incidentally, the people at the hotel and Tyler Heinze all said that when Guy got to the hotel, when he arrived, he was acting normal. Like, his behavior was totally normal. And the store clerk where Guy had stopped said he didn't act scared or worried, and he didn't behave like a man who had just beaten 8 people to death. Like 8 people in his family to
and
death.
He's high.
Right. Nobody saw any blood on him. And with that crime scene, there would be blood all over
I'm just thinking adults, able-bodied adults, could wrestle somebody that's high, I would think.
A 5'8", 180-pound man.
Yeah.
4 men could overpower him. Even if we move the time to the killings up just after Michelle made that first phone call at 2:16 a.m. And make the suggestion that the 3:45 a.m. phone call was somehow made by Guy on accident and not by a living, breathing Michelle, he still wouldn't have had 2 to 3 hours that the police said it would take. And then you have to add up the cleanup time and disposal of the murder weapon and still get him to the Best Western at 5:30. Also, a neighbor said that she woke up twice between 2:30 and 4 because the Toler's pit bull that was tied to the front porch was barking.
So we can assume that the dog was barking because somebody was in the trailer?
Somebody was probably in the trailer. And it was said that the pit bull was okay with strangers or was okay with people that it knew, but not with strangers.
Right.
That it would bark.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And I know this sounds biased, but I'm just going to say I'm having a hard time thinking that he's guilty. Yeah. But I want everybody to make their own decisions, so I put links on the bottom. But we're going to go on. I'm going to do my best, but we're going to go on. But setting the timeline aside, the prosecution's case also pointed out that Guy had taken a shotgun from the house and put it in the car he was driving before calling for help for the 7 people that were already dead and the 2 people left struggling for their lives. And remember, though Guy thought that gun was stolen, he immediately told the police about it. Like, he was just like up front and it's like, man, I took it. It's in my car.
Well, I would think, after seeing, you know how your mind works and how when trauma hits you and panic and all of that. So instead of realizing, I better get rid of the stolen gun because I don't want my family in trouble, even though they're all dead. Like, there's a bigger crime that has occurred. You know what I'm saying? So, like, he panicked.
He wasn't in his right mind. Well, obviously, he was on crack, but his mind wasn't following the dots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He panicked over something he shouldn't have, because in this whole scheme of things, whether the gun was stolen was not even
that's what I mean.
Half as big, right?
No, but see, in that moment, that did not. To me, that kind of indicates that he didn't. If you just murdered your family, you're not going to give two craps about that gun and if it's hot or not. Do you see what I'm saying? So it was like he was still in that I got to protect my family mode, not even realizing that they're dead and gone.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, something else that prosecution said pointed to Guy Jr. being the murderer was that inside the car, the police found a prescription medication that belonged to Michael Toler, and Michelle Toler's cell phone was in there that had Joseph West's dried blood on it. Also, there was some sort of document or piece of paper that was found in Rusty Sr.'s room that had his blood on it, Rusty's blood, and it also had Guy Heinze Jr.'s fingerprints in the blood. Police also found a knife that was in the living room that had blood on its tip, and that was from Russell Toler Jr. Lastly, Guy was wearing a pair of khaki shorts that he wore all night, and that had blood smears on the bottom, and the blood belonged to Rusty.
Mm-hmm.
Guy also wore a pair of gym shorts in lieu of underwear.
Mm-hmm.
And that pair of shorts had the blood of 3 victims. It had Michael, Rusty, and Chrissy's blood smudged, not spattered on the thigh. It was smudged. And there was also blood on the tops of his flip-flops that belonged to West and Guy Heinze Sr. But that's it. Besides the little smear of blood on the hem of his khaki shorts, the little smear of blood from 3 victims, and the spattering of blood on the high tops, that's all the blood that was on, not his high tops, sorry, his flip-flops. That's all the blood he had on him. Nothing else. With over 1,000 pieces of evidence and 220 injuries to the victims, it would take more than one episode of this podcast to cover everything in the trailer and on the bodies. Like, I'm not joking. We could do a long form podcast on this. There was also over 20 pages of leads totaling 25,000.
Leads of like suspects they needed to follow up on?
Just leads of things that needed to be followed up on.
Okay.
But much of the physical evidence was mishandled, lost, or never tested. And while police claimed that they followed up on 70 pages of these leads, there were no annotations besides any of them to show which were investigated and which weren't. So I kind of find it hard to believe that one shift of officers could have followed up on the 2,500 leads.
No, I would think not.
Right. So if there's no annotations, how does the next shift know where to start on the list and what to do? And right.
Ugh.
An example of how some of the other evidence was mishandled was that a bloody handprint was found on the wall. Some people said it was a headboard, but I think it was the wall of Rusty's bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
That handprint was compared to Guy Heinze Jr., and it wasn't a match.
Oh.
And it was never run through any of the state or national databases to see who it did match.
Mm-hmm.
There was no fingerprints collected from the victims' bodies, even though it was clear that some of them were held down.
I think there has to be more than one killer.
That's what the defense said, too.
I just don't think...
They thought it was anywhere between 5 to 8 people.
I just don't think you could kill that many adults.
Large men, able body.
I just don't think it. There has to be more than one.
In a short period of time in a less than 1,000-foot trailer.
When one person is killing, let's give him credit and say he is killing 2 people at one time. What are the other adults doing? They're running. They're not going to stay there.
Mm-hmm. You would think. The windows were open because it was a hot night. There's no air conditioner. You'd think somebody would have heard.
Were they drugged before?
No. I don't believe that was tested. Or if the bodies were tested for drug and alcohol, there's nothing to be found on it.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sorry,
right.
I jumped ahead, but I couldn't help it. I just have questions.
Yeah, I know. I have a lot of questions on this. That's why there needs to be more looked into this, I think. Shortly after the crime, a woman named Gail Montgomery found a bloody hammer and bloody homemade nunchucks in a stack of tires that had just been discarded. Now, assuming that the 2 weapons had most likely been used at the crime scene since they were bloodied, she called and she reported it to the police. The police retrieved them.
They didn't do anything.
The police retrieved them, but later at the trial, they denied they ever received her phone call.
What?
But there was a recording and a record of her calling the station. Plus, she testified for the fact that she did call them. I think she was the manager of the trailer court. So the 2 bloodied items were never tested. They were never entered into evidence. Even things as simple as bagging Guy Jr.'s clothing that night of the murders were handled improperly. And so instead of putting each item of clothing into separate bags, like separate evidence bags, they put them all, including his flip-flops, in the same bag. So moreover the bag wasn't even entered into evidence until the next day. That meant the evidence was unaccounted for and could have been tampered with at any time in that 24-hour period. Like the bottoms of his shoes could have been on his shorts. The blood on the bottom. Right.
What?
From court testimony, even more examples of mishandled evidence came to light. Police officers agreed that in the south bathroom of the home, there was blood evidence that suggested the murderer or murderers had been injured in the attack and had left items of clothing in that bathroom. They subsequently photographed the clothing, but failed to preserve it for testing. They believe the murderer had also washed an enormous amount of blood from their hair, ears, nostrils, bodies, right, using the sink in the bathroom. Well, that sink and bathtub, those drain taps, were removed from all the drains in the home. But like the bloody clothing, they were discarded, disposed of, and never tested.
What do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know what you mean, but...
Right. That's what I've been saying through this whole thing. What do you mean? Yeah. The DNA from the clothing and the drains could have either incriminated Guy Jr. even more and thus proved the police's theory without a doubt, or it could have exonerated him early into the investigation. The 2 neighbors who witnessed Guy coming home that morning and then running out of the trailer the first time, they both said that Guy didn't have any blood on him.
And they saw him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they saw him. Guy said that
killed that many people. Mm-hmm. Oh wow. Okay.
Bludgeoned, not shot, but bludgeoned.
That's what I mean.
Them. Right. And Guy said that what little blood he did have on his shoes and shorts came from him searching through the crime scene for a phone and sitting with Michael while Michael was dying. He was trying to comfort Michael. Now, a flaw in the police's theory is the general condition of Guy Jr. Like, he didn't have any scratches on him. Mm-hmm. I mean, he did have a small cut on his leg, but it wasn't fresh. He didn't even have any bruises or other abrasions. Guy claimed that the cut on his leg came from a piece of plywood earlier in the work week. And if the police truly believed the killer was injured in the attack and used the south bathroom of the trailer to clean up, where were those injuries on Guy?
Mm-hmm.
And while it appeared that some of the victims, like Michael, were killed where they slept and gave only a minimal amount of resistance, others fought back. Brenda, the woman who had suffered the stroke, had trouble walking, and she apparently fought for her life. There's a little blood spatter from the beating of Brenda Falagan because she had a pillow over her face as she was beaten. The physical evidence, which was transferred blood in the shape of fingers on her left wrist, showed that she had struggled with her left arm, which was held down while someone beat her. So the question is, how do you hold a pillow over somebody's face, beat them, and yet hold the arm down?
Tells me there's more than one killer.
Right? I mean,
or a man
with 3 arms.
That could be.
I don't know. People can be creative. I'm not going to
And
lie.
it could happen, but I don't think
possibility.
that many people. Like maybe 4, maybe. Like I said, the one standout would be as if they were drugged and they were passed out, then they wouldn't necessarily fight back and it would be easy. But I don't know.
Rusty Sr., he put up a huge struggle. There's blood spatter evidence showed that he was hit from both sides of the bed at the same time.
At the same time? Meaning
That's
2 killers.
What one of the defense said, yes. That's the defense's witness said that. And there is a BBC documentary that shows all the blood, and you can see the different blood spatter angles there.
Okay.
It also appeared that Chrissy Toler tried to escape through a window, but was somehow dragged back into the trailer. So if that happened, that would mean that either she was one of the last ones to be killed or that everybody just kind of watched that happen.
Which would not be the case.
You wouldn't think that her boyfriend would allow that, or her father or brother.
No.
Brenda's window was also open, and the shade was pulled aside. And so it's possible that Brenda had opened the window because it was so hot that night. It also could have been like an exit or entrance for the killers. But in all likelihood, the culprits either came through the window or back door, because otherwise they would have had to go within striking distance of the family's pit bull, which was tied to the front porch.
The one barking earlier.
The one barking, right. And just so we're clear, the window was never dusted for prints.
What?
Nothing. Yeah.
Was this just small town police mistakes?
I've read comments on all these videos, and some people are like, oh, if you think the police were crooked, you should see the DA. You know what I mean? And I do believe backwoods
that's
justice,
what I mean.
maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know. Or it could be, you know what, we've got this drug addict, let's just get him for it. But that's just me.
Yeah, but then there's somebody else. If he didn't do it, then there's somebody out there that annihilated a whole family. Which to me is more important than, Yep.
Well, just say that the forensic expert, Michael Knox, stated that there was no physical evidence that linked Guy Heinze Jr. to the crime scene.
I have a hard time believing that he would not be covered in head to toe in blood.
With blood. Because supposedly they were bludgeoned with what they think of as a barrel of a shotgun. So, but we'll get to that too. But this case was also plagued with jury problems. Several of the jurors expressed that they were confused throughout most of the trial. And while the jury is supposed to be sequestered, one juror was overheard talking about the case with their spouse. One juror said that one of the reasons they concluded Heinze was guilty was because he, quote, showed no remorse for the murderers. I mean, I guess they never considered the fact that maybe he didn't show any remorse was because he didn't kill anybody.
Plus, I think it's shock. Like,
right?
Could you imagine Jen killed her entire family and you didn't?
Well, but that's also stating that it's that whole, they didn't consider him innocent until proven guilty. Well, he didn't show any remorse, so he must be guilty. It just showed that they thought him guilty just because he was on trial, to me at least. Another juror said that Heinze, quote, wouldn't even look at the crime scene photos. Now, again, it's your family beaten to death and you didn't do it. I wouldn't look at the photos, right? There are images of lacerated faces, teeth were knocked in, eyes crushed in their socket. I mean, it would be horrifying to think if Guy did that he would look at the crime scene photos, or even could have.
I'm still concerned with if he didn't do it, who did? Like, that is
I know.
What would be the motive?
I know. Well, there's a different juror that thought his response to the 911 operator, the whole, it looks like a fucking murder scene. They thought that was kind of flippant, and it kind of made her believe that his hysteria was all an act. And another one thought that he was a smart aleck to the operator.
Now, see, I think that's a different way, because I've been on the 911 call and they're asking questions, they're not moving quick enough, and you get snippy.
And he's worried. First, he's worried about Michael. He wants them to come and get Michael. Michael's breathing, and then he's worried about his brother. He's worried about telling his brother that their dad's dead. Their mom had already died, so it's just him and his brother now.
Yeah, see, I take that the other way.
Me too.
Because if you really did it, you would have in your mind to follow that like script, and that would not be saying something snotty like that. You know what I'm saying? Oh my God, I don't know. I'm just so devastated. The fake crying, fake stuff. Yeah.
A very problematic thing and very disturbing was All the while he was on trial, the death penalty was on the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the jury was deadlocked for several days and they just couldn't reach a verdict. Well, one of the juries had to be removed and was placed with an alternate. And the removed juror had been arguing with others, and some of the other jurors were actually crying. He brought them to tears. Right. Well, I'll get into the other juror. I just want to say this real quick. But once that juror was taken off and the death penalty was removed, when the new alternate was brought in,
mm-hmm.
the jury reached a guilty verdict within hours.
You don't say.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about this removed juror. I mean, he was problematic from the beginning. He was juror 152. He was a retired federal law enforcement officer.
Mm-hmm.
And during the screening process, when you go to trial, you know, they ask if you knew anybody in the court that's on trial. Yeah, he knew. He disclosed the fact that his daughter went to the same school as Guy and that they were friends.
Oh.
And that his daughter had never seen him become violent at all. Yet he was still picked to be on the jury.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah. I mean, usually that's just like, nope, sorry, you're out of there. That's guaranteed to get you off a jury. And not only was the one who tried to speak to his wife, but he also attempted to discuss the evidence in the case with the sheriff's deputy who was chaperoning the jury.
Oh, that's going to be a big no.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He also contacted a detective from another state for advice about assessing Heinze's statement to the police.
The juror did?
The juror did. That's why, like, he finally got kicked off.
Yeah.
Like, he was problematic from the start. And he was the one that would insist that Guy was innocent, and he was the one that was deadlocking the jury. But he was problematic from the get-go. Anyway, the defense had plenty of arguments to counter the prosecution's arguments. For one thing, the police never looked for any other suspects. Even if Guy was involved, the evidence says that there was more than one person involved in these killings. No effort was ever made to find a second individual. One witness stated that there were threats issued by gang members that said that they were, quote, going to kill the whole family. And while that could have been just talk to make themselves seem tough, if a follow-up was ever done, that information has never been made public. A witness who overheard those comments gave the police the names of the individuals, and one of the two in question was in jail at the time of the murders and couldn't have been involved. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that the witness got one of the names mixed up or that the other gang member had gone through with the threat just with a different accomplice. Again, all questions could have been answered if they had just been asked.
Wow.
One argument the prosecutors made to explain why not one person from the trailer managed to call 911 or to make an escape while these beatings were happening was because they reasoned that Guy had killed them all one by one while they were sleeping and had done it very quietly.
No, because that one, you said the one fought back, so they're going to be screaming and stuff.
You'd think.
No way.
And if that was the case, the defense argued, and Guy could not be heard killing the individual family members, then what was the reason to kill all 8 people in the first place if nobody heard him killing Rusty Toler Sr., who the police claim fought with Guy over prescription drugs? Then, in effect, there were no witnesses, so why would Guy need to kill everyone?
Mm-hmm.
And furthermore, Guy already had a bag of the exact same pain pill in the car with him that night.
So why kill somebody for it?
Why kill somebody for another bag? And there were 2 containers of that drug found. One was Michael's prescription in the trailer, and the other was with Guy all night in the car. The prosecution would remind the defense that even though Guy had a bag of the same drug already in the car, that didn't mean he wouldn't want more to sell. Now, forensics showed that Guy Heinze Sr. was the only one of the 8 who was actually asleep at the time of his murder.
Do they know which one he attacked first?
Not that we're aware of.
Uh-huh.
Or who was attacked first, let's say.
Yeah.
For the defense team, the idea that Joe West, Rusty Toler Sr., Russell Toler Jr., Chrissy, and Michelle could not have all jumped Guy at one time and stopped him, it's ludicrous. The 3 perfectly healthy men could have held Guy even for a moment. One of the girls could have run out of the trailer and sought for help. The prosecution brought forth a witness saying that there was no way Russell Toler Jr. would have ever let Guy borrow his car because that was his baby, the witness said. And speaking of the car was never taken into evidence. And if Guy had driven it after the murders, before cleaning it up, there would have been blood evidence in the car, correct?
Correct.
And even if he had time to clean it up, which he hadn't, luminol would have shown the smeared blood.
Even he was comforting, was it Michael that was dying?
Michael. Mm-hmm.
He should have blood on him from that alone. Like way more blood. And that's
or just
comforting
walking through
somebody.
the house, I would think would have a lot of blood. Like, I don't know. Now, police suspected that the murder weapon was the barrel of a shotgun since there was a broken gun stock next to Russell Toler's head. Now, if you add the gun stock to the hammer and the nunchucks, then we're up to 3 weapons. I mean, 4 if you want to count the knife with Russell's blood
and all the
on
weapons
tip.
were left behind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it could easily indicate more than one killer.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, nobody will ever know the hammer and the nunchucks were actually used in the killings because they were never tested.
I don't understand. What's the population of this town?
I have no idea. I should have looked that up.
Like, is it 400 people? Because that's what it sounds like.
It sounds like it. And mostly police officers. I don't know. Now, there is no argument to be made against the fact that people on crack can often exhibit astounding displays of strength. They can be easily angered and exhibit poor judgment. But if you accept that fact, then Guy's decision to put the gun and the phone in the car is just another example of drug-induced poor judgment.
Mm-hmm.
What he experienced and what was running through his mind can only be guessed. Now, since the police officers and the jurors have most likely never found themselves in that same situation, it would be difficult to judge without bias. There are definitely 3 points of view into this case. One is that Guy Heinze Jr. killed 8 people in a drug-fueled rage, all by himself, sustaining no injuries with very little blood on him.
With 4 male adults in the house.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And he did all this all over prescription pills and whatever money he could scrounge up from the people he loved.
That he already had some in the car.
Mm-hmm. He also just got paid, so he had like close to $400 in his pocket.
And also to get said prescription, it would be better off to have the person stay alive so that you could keep getting that fix.
Mm-hmm. The second camp believes that Guy Heinze Jr. had participated in the killings, but didn't act alone. Again, not sustaining any injuries, and he had very little blood on him. And the third camp, go ahead.
I was going to say, and if that theory is he was in there, like in the corner watching all this take place.
Or he could have hired somebody.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The third camp believes that he's completely innocent. And I kind of fall in this place. The very least, many people believe he didn't get a fair trial and the investigation was poorly executed.
Oh, they didn't test half of it, more than half.
I know. There's some things that in the BBC documentary that I watched, it said that the police only took pictures of the evidence. Didn't collect them, just took pictures.
That makes no sense. Mm-hmm. I mean, this could clear him or positively put him in prison forever. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't they? I don't know.
Well, Joe West dealt drugs out of that trailer. Chrissy Toler testified against 2 people, and that testimony landed those 2 people with a 30-year prison sentence. So you could make the argument that there could have been other people who had more reasons to kill the family than Guy did. Guy, they say, just wanted the prescription drugs and got mad because he didn't get it. Toler Heinze, the younger brother, also hinted at the fact that Guy Jr. could have ticked off the wrong drug people.
So I was thinking that too. And they descended upon it and it was like massacre, in, out, and that's
Thinking that Guy would be there, but he wasn't, right. And so while he didn't actually kill those 8 people, he could have been the reason for their deaths.
Yeah.
And then there's still the question, if Guy had killed everybody, why did he come back to the trailer at all? Couldn't he have just hung out with Tyler?
Well, I do.
All day?
And then he would have been in the clear. And I also, I go back to putting the gun in the trunk. You just would not do that. I think you panicking to protect your family, he did that. So why would you do that if you just killed them all? I just don't see why. What's the point of that? Right.
And it's thought that he likely returned home because he knew that Russell Jr., I should say, he wanted his car back. Remember, that was his baby, his car. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure he brought it back fully expecting Russell to be alive. Well, what can't be argued is the devastation brought to the Heinze, Toler, and West families. Faced with an unexpected hardship of paying for 7 funerals at one time, the community came together and donated money to all the family for their funeral expenses. In addition, funeral homes and monument makers in the area offered to discount their services. Chrissy's son, who's now 17, suffered severe injuries and was raised by his paternal grandparents. If Guy Heinze Jr. is innocent, then the real killers are at large and they've never faced any kind of punishment for their actions. And if Guy is guilty, but didn't act alone, some parties involved have never been brought to justice either.
Don't you think he'd squawk, though? And coming through all of this, I'd be like, okay, if I'm going down, so are you guys.
So Guy Jr.'s brother, Toler, never wavered in his support for his brother and his belief of his innocence. In fact, when his brother was found guilty and sentenced to life with prison without parole, Toler lost control and screamed profanities in the courtroom. And he was taken outside, and as he walked past reporters, he shouted, quote, "You saw the same trial I did." As he had said many times that he wouldn't be satisfied with anything less than a murder weapon with his brother's fingerprints on it.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't get it and didn't even get close. And I will say in the BBC documentary that I'm talking about, it's called Life in Death Row. There's a scene where Toler walks out among reporters and he's like saying this. He's like, "You saw the same trial I did. You did this." Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, those reporters looked shocked by the verdict. I think one of them said something to the fact like, well, you can't always predict what's going to happen.
You can't.
No.
That's where he needs another trial, and he needed a better attorney, for sure.
Yeah, his attorneys seemed pretty competent, though. I guess the prosecution was just better.
You're not testing the evidence? How can you put somebody to prison for life when you didn't even test the evidence? Mm-hmm. They could have 8 different people's fingerprints on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, Toler, the youngest brother, passed away in March of 2022. He was like 28 years old. So if Guy is ever granted a new trial, one of the many tragedies is that Toler won't be around to see it. So, but like I said, there's so much information on the internet about this crime that we can't cram it into one podcast, let alone one Christmas episode. But we really want you to investigate it of your own. There's documentaries on YouTube, and I'll have it linked. It's not a real documentary, but it's like a woman goes through like the entire thing. You can go on Facebook. I believe they have a page called Guy's Voice. And I know at one time Guy would get on, they'd call him and he'd talk so you could hear it come from his own perspective. There's also the BBC documentary. And I'm telling you, I never get mad at, I get so mad at these interviewers, the jury, I should say. The foreman said this, and I took it one way. You may take it differently, but the foreman said this: "We all decided walking into the deliberation, if we are deciding whether the police department made mistakes, it's an open and shut case. But that's not what we were here to decide."
Well, that right there tells me he needs another trial.
Right. They knew the police made mistakes, but yet, yeah. So,
well, I think the only thing that I could think of would be the drug deal, and they just went in there, had 8 people, you each get one, take them out, it's in, it's out, it's quick, you're done, and then you go. That's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Or knock all the big guys out first and then get the
but I still think that somebody would escape. Somebody would have tried to escape, unless they had bars on the windows and couldn't get out.
No, most of the windows were open because there was no air conditioning and it was hot. It's early September in Georgia, for goodness sake.
Plus, what you hear, like the rattling of the door and then people in there and the commotion, that alone would wake you up.
Right. Well, there is a change.org petition that I will put the link to if you research this on your own, because I know this is a little biased, but I can't see that the guy needs a new trial. That's all I'm going to say.
At the very least.
He needs, at the very least. And this is supposedly, this change.org, they're doing this to grant him a new trial. I will put the link in the sources, but I really do beg everybody to go look this up on your own accord and try to find out, because I really think there's a total injustice has been served against Guy. He might not be completely innocent, but it's horrible to think of there's so much evidence missing. Mm-hmm. The bloody handprint over Rusty Sr., like over his bed, they only ran it to see if it matched Guy's.
And it didn't.
And when it didn't match Guy's, they never ran it anywhere else. Like, they didn't even check the other victims in the trailer to see if that was their handprint.
Well, see, and I was just thinking that. What if one of the ones in there, I don't know.
It's very questionable. And like I said, I wanted to do this in 2020, maybe 2019, but it was just so much that I needed help, and Loretta helped me. And I gave this to Loretta. I'm just like, here, do it. Tell me what you think. And she's like, I don't know if you guys want to do this for Christmas because I don't think this guy's guilty.
Yeah.
Because normally we do closed cases, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
As this one is closed, there's just a huge question mark as to if he's really guilty. for us anyway.
And maybe, you know what? Maybe a listener will know something else, and that, because there's some cases that I've done, and then somebody will comment or reach out and say there's more to the story. And there always is.
But you would think, too, if Guy would have taken a metal pipe or the metal barrel of a shotgun and hit 8 people with it, badly killing them, mangled their bodies, right? 220 injuries, right? Over with 8 people. You would think his hands would be swollen. You would think there'd be blood on his hands from the impact of the blood spatter. There's nothing. You would think it would be even under his fingernails.
That's what I was thinking.
And you know how hard it would be to get the blood up.
But did they even test underneath his fingernails? Did they even do any of that?
I don't know. It hasn't been said.
Unbelievable.
But if they did take, you would be able to see the blood.
Yeah.
Because, if you cut your finger at all and blood runs under your fingernail, it takes forever to get that blood out.
Yeah.
You'd have to soak your hands with Madge, dishwashing liquid, So I don't know. I personally feel that there's an injustice. I did listen to the Gen Y guys, Justin and Aaron, and they didn't give their opinion whatsoever. So it was useless. But they, of course, covered everything in here, too. Go listen to them if you want a non-bias. I couldn't read.
You couldn't read the room? You couldn't tell which way they were going?
I couldn't read if Aaron or Justin what they believed. And they're like, just go look it up for yourself. But
they
here,
said that?
I'm an open book. Yeah, they're like, whether you go look it up and make your own decision. And I strongly urge everybody to do that too. But it's suspicious. And technically, yes, a grown man on crack cocaine could possibly kill 8 people.
I don't think so. Not with 4 adult males, unless they're all cracked
only
out too.
Only one was asleep. Only one.
So
the
that's even more.
said that he was awake or asleep. Yeah. So I don't know. 2 of them were not in were supposedly weren't where they started out at. They had been moved.
They had been moved, or they tried to escape?
They were not in the room that they should have been in, and it showed that they had moved. I don't know. Go look it up. Go watch it your own.
I'm going to go look it up.
Seriously,
is what I'm going to
do. That BBC documentary is really fascinating. And it is very biased. It is a documentary. As we all know, all documentaries have some sort of bias. There's really never, ever a,
True. All right.
But it's done through the eyes of the defense, Guy's defense. So, of course, it's biased. But those juries, I'm telling you.
Don't get me started on that.
The one that said that he's a smart aleck because he talked to the cops. Yeah. I don't know. And she does say that she's really young and doesn't have a lot of life experience, but I don't know. Anyway, that's day 8.
Man, that's a lot, Jen.
I know. Go watch the documentary. Go watch the YouTube things. Look up any information you can find on it. I feel that you guys will come to the same conclusion as I do. That he, at least at the bare minimum, needs a new trial.
Yeah. Has the Innocence Project taken a look at it? Do you know?
I don't know. They should.
Yeah. All right.
This could be one.
Well, that was amazing, Jen.
Eye on Innocence is the only one that kind of had something on it, but I can't find anything else on them. There's no Facebook page. There's no longer a website or anything. But go check out all my links and do your research. But anyway, that's day 8.
Day 8. Back to me tomorrow, day 9.
Tomorrow.
Until then, remember, lock your doors.
Keep passing by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Love ya. For more information about this episode, as well as all other sources, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by the hosts, Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertesi from We Talk of Dreams. You can reach Nico at wetalkofdreams.com. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from OctoberPod VHS. You can find all of his great works on YouTube. Please make sure to like and subscribe to our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter with the handle at Our True Crime Pod. You can also email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. We would also at this time like to thank our patrons. We would be so lost without you. Thank you so much. And if you would like to help support the show, you can check us out on patreon.com/Our True Crime Podcast. You can also show your support by leaving a 5-star review on Apple or simply just tell your friends about us. It's that easy. Love ya.